What happens?
There it goes.
Hey, there we are. So we're recording.
Yes.
So I am here with Alicia McCall. And I totally just butchered your first name again. Please say your first name correctly for me.
Alicia McCalla.
Alicia McCalla. I'm sorry. You
It's
told me I
okay.
had permission to butcher your husband's last name though, so I can call you McCalla all day. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. You gave me for the Dialogue Doctor, you gave me your script, Becoming a Legend, Becoming a Hero from the Heroes League series. Did I get that right? Heroes League
Yes,
series?
hero. It's gonna be Heroes League, and the series will be Heroes Legacy.
Heroes Legacy. That's right. So, and it was such a great first chapter to read. I really loved it. It's got such great pacing. The characters are super engaging. I can't wait to see the final book. And I appreciate you just taking this time to let me play with it a little bit and talk about dialogue. So thank you for letting me do this.
Cool beans.
And so tell us a little bit about what you're writing. You're writing science fiction urban fantasy. Is that right?
So this particular story was going to be a superhero series. I generally write dark fantasy. Sometimes I do a little YA. This one is post-apocalyptic though.
Awesome. And your
Mhm.
first series was African Elements?
African Elementals, yes. So
Elementals.
that was a dark fantasy series. Lot I almost want to say dark fantasy horror.
Nice.
Serial killer hunting down girls, trying to kill them and steal their magic.
Wow. Sounds intense and great.
It was.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was looking at the covers yesterday on Amazon and they look really fantastic. So I'm going to try to pick one up and ride through since dark fantasy is kind of my wheelhouse. I'm excited about digging into them. Something else I happen to know about you, because we've talked once before, is that you love writing diverse heroes.
I do.
Would you talk a little bit about that?
Um, for me, when I was a child, there was not many books out there that had, I would just say African American characters or people of color as the main characters. I did not find a science fiction author until I was in college. And I had been reading science fiction and fantasy well into my teens. So just to give you an idea of my age, I'm 50 this year. So I've
I
been
would have
reading,
never guessed.
I would have been reading science fiction and fantasy for a lot of years.
Yeah. And I think I love that because it's so important, especially in science fiction and fantasy where we talk about like future projection stuff. It's
Yeah.
so important that kids from minorities and like teens from minorities can project themselves into heroes in the future.
Yes.
So because it speaks more than just like, yeah, you can be a hero too. It also speaks to this like you have future, which is
Yes.
I think I love that you're doing that. I think it's super important.
It's
So
critical. One of the things when I first started writing, I would end up invariably on panels and I would be the only person of color. And a lot of the speakers would say, well, it doesn't matter what color the person is, or it doesn't matter this or that. And finally, one day I got so frustrated and I was like, you know what? Why are you writing Black people out of the future? And
yeah,
they were like, what?
yeah,
But that's what you're doing. It's kind of genocide in the future. It's sad. But I think now with self-publishing, there are so many opportunities and so many authors who are stepping up and bringing these protagonists who are, just different. Not even just people of color, but all kinds that you never would have seen before in the traditional format. So it's
yeah,
exciting to me to see all the
yeah. It's
diverse
beautiful.
stories that are coming out on the scene.
Yeah, I love it so much. I was immediately excited when I started reading the chapter you sent me because it has such great diversity in it, and the future leaning of it does all those such great things about like bringing the potential of heroism into young readers' minds in characters
Right.
that look and feel like they look and feel, which is just beautiful and great. So thanks for sharing this with me and with us. I really appreciate it. So what I'm gonna want to do is I don't want to drag us through the whole chapter because so much of it was really good, and I actually didn't have very many notes on lots of it. Lots of it was great. Where I had nothing to add. I was just like, yeah, that's awesome. I'll just read that. And it's good. So I'm going to pull out a couple places where dialogue was really strong. And I'm looking at these examples. Let me share my screen with all of us so we can see it. I'm looking at these examples because I think they can teach us some things about dialogue, not just about writing in general. So can you see my screen there, the
I
Word
can
document
see
that's
it.
up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I want to do is I'm just going to read the original and then read the edit. And as we read the edit, talk about some areas that I think can really enhance dialogue. So the original, you wrote, "Happy 18th birthday, loser hero. My stepsister's words echoed through my head. I took a somber breath. I had a very long night. I bit my lip, thinking, how was I going to be able to boost my abilities high enough so I could become a cage agent and move out of my parents' home? If I didn't get out soon, my stepsister was going to kill me. I hated Heather." So there's so much I love about this opening. I am a sucker. I mean, I'm obsessed with dialogue, but I'm a sucker for any script that starts with dialogue. Oh my gosh, it's the best. I love it so much.
I actually struggled with that because I was thinking, oh, maybe this might throw people off. So I'm glad that you like that.
Oh, I love it. So the thing about dialogue for me is that it lets me put the character's voice in my mouth when I'm reading. So I more so than narrative, dialogue allows me to project myself into the character. So I love when a script starts off, when a story starts off with like a super strong, memorable, meaningful quote, which is what you have here, because this theme of loser hero, I assume, runs through the whole book. I've only read the first chapter. It's super strong in the first chapter. So I love it because you've used the dialogue to like punch us right in the face with, this is the struggle of the theme, right? Like the struggle of the theme is it okay for me to be a hero? It's so great. So when dialogue is meaningful like that, I love it at the start because there's no waiting. It jumps right in. The other thing I love about what you created here is the pacing of it. I feel like I'm really in XJ's head. XJ is the main character. We're seeing this all through her perspective. And it's just a great entrance to XJ's character. And I realized just now, I don't know XJ's pronouns. Is XJ he, she, her?
XJ is a she.
Okay, just double checking before we go on and I say it 1,000 times and get it wrong. Stop me before I just roll through. So that was the opening, really strong opening. There were a couple edits in here I made just to kind of enhance what you were already doing. So the first thing with that very lyrical opening quote, "Happy 18th birthday, loser hero." I liked it, but when I read it out loud, I stumbled over the loser hero.
Gotcha.
Because it just didn't flow out of my mouth appropriately. And again, all edits are, and I think this is important for all of us as writers to understand, all edits are suggestions. So, because so much of getting engrossed in work is relative to what we love and what we don't love. So it's possible that I say pull out the loser and you're like, no, I like it. It sounds right coming out of my mouth. So put it right back. All that to say, these are suggestions. There's no right or wrong. This is all just gray about preference. So I pulled the loser and just made it hero, and then created a little more inner dialogue for the character so that she could explain the tension, because I don't want to lose the tension, and I want the reader to know right away that the word hero is being used differently here, that the word hero is like being punched in a way that makes it a insult. So instead I started it with happy 18th birthday, hero. My sister's words echoed through my head. It was the way she punched the last word, hero. Um, it was the way she punched the last word, hero. And again, I messed up here. This should be wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Hero wasn't a compliment. She's throwing it in my face. She might as well have been saying happy birthday, loser. So bringing both of them back, giving the reader the like contrast, but making it more realistic to what Heather, who's the antagonist here, might actually say, in that, is she going to take the time to say loser, hero, or is she going to communicate loser through her intonation? And for me, it felt, and again, subjective, for me, it felt, let's bring it in the intonation, and put the intonation in the reader's mind, so that as they read it, they're starting to translate that word hero as loser to build the whole theme of the chapter in the story.
And then it looks like you echoed it. Mm-hmm.
I did. So what I wanted to do in the script was, because you say it echoed through my head, I want to go ahead and echo it, right? Like let the reader hear what XJ is hearing, right? Feel that dialogue come through. So happy 18th birthday, loser. My stepsister's words echoed in my head. It was the way she punched the last word. Hero wasn't a compliment. She was throwing it in my face. She might as well have been saying happy birthday, loser. Happy 18th birthday, hero. I took a somber breath. I'd had a very long night. Happy 18th birthday, hero. I bit my lip thinking, how was I going to be able to boost my abilities high enough so I could become a cage agent and move out of my parents' home if I didn't get out soon? My stepsister was going to kill me. I hated her. So I echoed it just to get that play in, and also because it's such a great opening scene, I wanted to spend more time in it, right? Like I want to live in it a little bit. So just broadening it out by giving the reader that echo. I actually had a fourth echo in here too, and I pulled it because it felt like too much. But giving the reader that ability to like live with XJ's thoughts. The last thing I did was, you had an exclamation here, I hated Heather. And I moved it out of that exclamation to I hated her. Part of the reason I did that was XJ's voice through the whole chapter. So something I love that you've done is, we get a really strong feeling for XJ's voice and who she is, not because of what she says, but because of what she thinks. So XJ actually doesn't say very much in the chapter. Like when we read through the whole chapter, XJ really, until we get to the end where she has a conversation with her stepmother, she doesn't talk a lot. She is being acted upon, right? So, and you really get, I love the tension. I assume it had to be intentional. The tension between XJ wanting to become a hero and the circumstances of life acting upon her, which was really great. Like the way you built that out was fantastic. So you've got Heather, her stepsister, abusing her. You've got life circumstances that have put her into this life with a stepmom and stepsister, and you've got kind of separation from her hero lineage, and then you've got society pressing down on her, telling her not to be what she believes she is, which so many great messages in there for a hero to kind of like, so much great conflict for a hero to like fight through and rally through. It's really fantastic. So I pulled the exclamation here. Even though this isn't in quotes, I still count this as dialogue. It's that inner dialogue that she's having with herself and the world around her. So pulling out the exclamation and making it more that like stoic rock that's overcoming all of this felt right to me. Felt more like XJ's voice that we're going to hear further on, where she's pushing back on the world around her. So again, love the first scene, and love that it starts with a quote. Love getting into the dialogue right away, but making sure that dialogue feels realistic to the reader, like something someone would say. and then trying to bring it in later. And even as I read it, I mean, you know, editing anything, you edit it over and over and over again. I might actually even pull out some of this. I might even pull out that hero wasn't a compliment. I might delete that too. So it's just my stepsister's word echo in my head. It was the way she punched that last word. She was throwing it in my face. She might as well have been saying "Happy birthday, loser." I'd probably pull this hero wasn't a compliment as well. In fact, I'm going to do it right now because I'm OCD and I can't leave it there. So
it's okay.
Yeah, you know.
Well, I sent you the raw version, so this came straight out of what I originally came the concept. Now,
Well,
I did have a question because I think when I started it, I was thinking it was more internal dialogue, so that's why I had it in italics.
yeah, and that's a choice. And again, it's just preference for however you want it. I don't like italics unless my character is thinking something. So it's italics, but she's remembering something that somebody actually said. So I'm going to put that in when I write it, I'm going to put it in quotes so that, and part of it is when we're writing dialogue, there's this weird thing where we don't want the reader to have to go backwards in the text to interpret what was said, if that makes sense. So I put it in quotes right away because I want the reader to know someone's speaking here. Even though it's happening in her head, someone's talking, and it's not just a thought she's come up with on her own. And I want them to read that and then forward think into the text, who's talking, why are they saying this, and what does it mean, rather than reading it as an inner thought and then having to come back and go, oh, that was actually something that her sister said. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, and that's, again, it's all preference. I don't know that there's no right or wrong. Like there's no, this is the formal style manual for how you write an opening dialogue sentence. It's all just about what you do. Later in the script, I left italics, however you say that. I left it when it was XJ's inner thoughts, when she wasn't quoting somebody. Because it was a quote here, I wanted to pull it out.
Gotcha.
And by the way, if this is your rough draft, I'm super jealous because there's no way my rough draft.
This is my rough draft.
There's no way mine look anything like this. Mine are barely readable. This is fantastic. Okay, so let's jump on to the next major scene, which is this scene you have where XJ's asleep and she's cloaked in a room, and her stepsister Heather is trying to find her to smother her, which is such a man, talk about a powerful opening scene to a novel. It's great. The reason I pulled this out is I want to talk about Heather's voice and how I played with Heather's voice in the whole script, just to have a discussion about that. I find as an author, it's really weird the way I write a voice and perceive a voice, and then once you pass it over to a reader, it's kind of out of your hands, and the reader creates their own mental image of that character. So my mental image of the character of Heather was this very sinister, somewhat narcissistic, but at the same time having that balance of weird love in the form of I'm helping my little stepsister.
Yes.
But in these horrible ways.
Yeah. She really thinks she's helping.
Yeah, she thinks she's doing a great thing. She thinks waking XJ up in the middle of the night by trying to smother her with a pillow is amazing.
Yeah.
How were you envisioning Heather? Am I close there? Were you thinking some other direction with her? Or?
No, that's exactly what she was. She really, she feels like she's doing the right thing by toughening XJ up.
Yeah. That completely comes across. Even in that phrase that she's using, that loser hero, or as we changed it here, like calling at XJ a hero over and over again, you can really see that seed that is going to push XJ to becoming who she's going to become. That living up to the insult of her older stepsister, is that like firing off, which is great. So the original scene read, I knew that crazy girl intended to kill me. All I saw was her determined eyes and the royal blue tech line streaming across her white face as it glistened in the moonlight. Very pleased with herself, she said with a crooked smile, "You can't hide from me." She used her enhanced sensing tracking abilities to find the cloaked body. Heather whispered, "I'm doing you a favor, loser hero. You need to get tougher so you can overcome your weak abilities." I screamed. I tried to fight back using my palm to punch her, but Heather is older, bigger, stronger than me and doubled down with her suffocation technique. That weak cloak tech your grandfather created won't help you. I kept fighting and screaming. Heather grunted, holding the pillow in place. 2 points aren't enough, and you're embarrassing me in front of Rena because you're not strong enough. Heather held the pillow firmer. That's when I blacked out and life flashed before my eyes. So what I loved about this scene is the intensity of it is really great, and you feel the like critical nature of this, and Heather really comes across. So the couple edits I made in order to enhance those aspects of it. And the 2 things I really wanted to talk about and point out with you is that the talking in threes, and then removing narrative from the conversation so that the conflict between the 2 characters can really play out and almost create that movie in our reader's head, that like scene where they can see it. And then just beefing up Heather's narcissism. So those are kind of the 3 things I threw into this scene. So with the edits, it reads, the first opening sentence is great. I knew that crazy girl intended to kill me. All I saw was the determined eyes and the royal blue tech lines streaming across her white face as it glistened in the moonlight. This image here, I mean, crap, that's fantastic. Brings the reader right into that, like, okay, I'm in the dark, there's blue light, like it's such a great visual, very cinematic in that. And then her coming back and very pleased with herself, Heather whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You can't hide from me." In the original here, you had a description of what was going on. What I did was I took that description, I actually put it in an earlier paragraph so that we can just get intimate with Heather and XJ for a minute and dig right into what's happening in the scene and not have to break this intimate moment between the 2 of them to get in to think about why Heather's doing what she's doing. So I just pulled that narrative out and put it up top because it's such an important detail. It really describes what's going on, but not moving out of the dialogue. So the new scene would read, very pleased with herself, Heather whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You can't hide from me." With a laugh, she added, "You know I'm doing you a favor, hero. You need to get tougher. You need to learn to overcome your weaknesses." And focusing here, editing this line a little bit just to focus in on that, like, does it sound like something a real person would say? Because when we write, we're communicating so much story with every sentence, right? Like, which is clearly what you're doing here. You're building so much story you're bringing us into a world, and in this first chapter, like creating a world, creating characters, creating all this stuff at once, which is really amazing, but not losing the realism of voice so that the readers can feel like, yeah, that's how I would say that. Or intentionally saying, like, that's how I would not say that later with Nina, which the stepmother, which we'll get down to in a second. So I love this moment. I screamed. If I'm remembering correctly, it's the first audible utterance we get from XJ in this scene.
Mm.
So just communicating this like interior stuff going on. Her first utterance is a yell, which for me as a reader, having read the chapter and reading into it, there's this really great tension there between the kind of visceral oppression she's feeling in the world around her and her need to like burst out of it, which was really great. So but not spelling out the scream and not giving her an actual utterance, just this guttural like I screamed. I really like that. I tried to fight back using my palm to punch her, but Heather is older, bigger, stronger than me, and doubled down on her suffocation technique. That weak cloaking tech your grandfather created won't help you hide from me. So originally you had ended the line at help you.
Yes.
But bringing in, like, I wanted everything Heather does to be about Heather in some way, right? Like living in that like narcissist mind of like, yeah, everything the narcissist says is about the narcissist. So bringing that in, like, you can't hide from me, right? Like this is about you and I'm helping you, but this is also about me and me making sure you know me. But yeah, so just adding those 3 words there, I think brings Heather's voice out a little bit clearer, and that tension between the like crazy, punishing narcissistic side of her, and the tension between like I'm trying to do this thing for you. Anyway, it's good. If you can't tell, I got totally enwrapped in this. Great writing. Heather snorted a laugh. So I kept fighting and screaming. Heather snorted a laugh, holding the pillow over my face. She mocked me as she pressed down. So I edited this a little bit to give Heather action as she talks. There's this really great thing, and I don't see this as much in like classical literature. I think it's actually a product of TV, and I call it the Law and Order effect. So there's this weird thing that happens in TV shows where when 2 people are talking, they also have to be moving. They're never sitting still. And the weirdest place to see it is in Law and Order SVU, because they'll have these scenes where there's 3 detectives sitting in a room, and they're like sitting in the police station, and they're having a conversation about the case to like bring the reader through the case, bring the viewer through the case. And they're passing the ball of conversation between the 3 of them. But they do this weird thing where when one of them starts talking, they move. So they're all like sitting at desks, and like one of them will say like, yeah, so I was doing the criminal this way. And a normal person would just like sit still and say that. But as they start to talk, they actually get up and pace. And then at the end of their line, sit back down. And the next person picks up and they start like pacing, and then they sit back down.
I think I have seen that.
Yeah,
actually.
once you see it one time, you'll never forget it. You're like, oh my gosh. And I love Law and Order SVU because they've made so many of them that if you watch a later episode, it's almost comical. Like they've trained themselves like, don't talk and sit still unless you're trying to build this very dramatic moment. So there's something about us, people who consume TV, that think that way now, that the movement while talking intensifies the moment, brings action to the moment. So I added this action for her holding down the pillow in place. She mocked me as she pressed down, which was actually a line you had written later. I put it here, paired it with her dialogue to create that sense of urgency, movement, action with the reader. So Heather snorted a laugh, holding the pillow in place. She mocked me as she pressed down. 2 ports aren't enough. Come on, try harder. You're embarrassing me in front of Rena, but maybe you just aren't strong enough. I pushed back with all my might and caught a glimpse of air, but she pressed down with the pillow even firmer. So I added this line because dialogue is always a give and take, right? Like it's a push and pull. Even when one of the partners is silent, expressing that silence gives that feel of, so here we have XJ not replying with words, but replying with action, right? Like just trying to get out of the circumstances. And then I blacked out and my life flashed before my eyes. Love that ending of this scene because it brings that like desperate conclusion. And again, you're doing so much characterization with so few words, which is really it's just a gift. But you're doing so much in here. This ending this very tense scene with her losing consciousness very much gives the reader the subconscious feel of um, her powerlessness in the situation and wanting to struggle against it. So I loved another reason I wanted to look at this scene is I love what you did here at the end with her fighting her sister and it ending in a blackout, because it really does create that struggle and that tension against the world that she is currently overwhelming XJ, which is really, really great. Okay, that was my notes on the second scene. Anything you wanted to add or talk about?
No, I think that actually was interesting.
Okay,
I like
great.
what you said here. I like that.
Awesome. That always makes me happy. So now I'm going to drop down to the end of the piece. And I do want to say in the original document, which I think I can pull over. Can you see the original if I pull it over like that?
I see something.
Okay. Hopefully you're seeing a document that like the full document, it's smaller and has more edits in it.
Yes.
I'm not going to talk about this scene in detail, but I just wanted to encourage you because I loved it so much. If we come
The
into
flashback, yes.
the flashback. Oh man. So you have this great flashback to the moment that XJ's grandfather has to fight someone off and she loses her mom. Loses her living with her mother and grandfather. I just wanted to encourage you to make that its own chapter. It's such a
I did want to ask one question about that because
yeah.
I originally started with a prologue that I did not send you, but when I went back and reread the original prologue that I created, I realized that I had a lot of the things in that I had already put in the chapters that I've written, but this was actually fresh.
Oh,
So
nice.
I think it could probably become a prologue and still have the same or similar effect.
I like it, and I like that you're thinking that way.
Mm-hmm.
My only hesitation is that the opening of this chapter is so great, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
so much built into it. I really want the reader's first introduction to XJ to be this encounter with her stepsister, and I really want the first words to be "Happy 18th birthday, hero." Like, I love that. That's such a great, like, that's a memorable opening, right? Like, and it grabs you and it like forces you into this story in a way that like all of a sudden I'm consumed in this world. I would put this as a chapter 2. I would put it as a flashback chapter 2. I think the minute you talk about her being outside wearing her grandfather's cape, maybe adding a little bit of narrative in there about the cape being too big, lets the reader know that she's younger and that this is a flashback. Especially since you hint to it all in the dialogue here with her father, you hint to the fact that she's been taken away from her grandfather. So opening up in here, putting that grandfather scene in here with a larger cape, like I think the reader will get that it's a flashback and that she's remembering, maybe even at the end having her wake up from a dream, or having her like some way wake up and realize that she's not with her mother anymore or that she's not with her grandfather anymore. But part of the reason I also really wanted to bring this in is as its own standalone chapter is because the mother's such a powerful figure in her life, but we don't in the way it's written right now as a memory, we don't actually get to meet the mother. We just know she exists. And the grandfather's such a powerful figure in her life. We don't get to meet the grandfather. So I want to hear his voice, right? Like I want to see how he sounds. I want to hear the mother's voice. I want to see the conflict between her father and her mother, right? Like in the more traditional non-fantasy scene, it would be the little girl sitting on the front porch while her parents argue with police sirens flashing,
Yeah.
right? Like, and argue about, is this an appropriate home for our daughter, right? Like, which, talking about diverse readers, right? Like kids being shuffled from family to family and pulled out, like you're hitting all of those great themes that so often we skip in books, right? Like, you know, the idea that your hero is a young girl who's been moved from a home that she loves, but that culture has deemed unsafe, to a home that doesn't understand her and doesn't get her, I think is really powerful for the reader. So creating a scene where the dad is talking to the mom and they're arguing over what house she goes to, and the father finally just pulling a trump card. It's like, she's coming with me. You know, I think speaks to things that we culturally live through now, and is a great moment to like connect to your reader. So yeah, I would just encourage you to make that a chapter 2, not a chapter 1, because I don't want to lose the great opening you have. But I also don't want to lose this scene because it's such a strong, powerful life character establishing scene for XJ.
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking maybe it would have been stronger as the prologue. So I'm going to have to think about what you said there,
Okay.
because I feel like some of this chapter has a lot of weight because of that. Like you kind of understand in the end why it hurt XJ so bad.
Yeah.
You know, what her stepsister actually did to her in the end.
That's true. And I think you would have to pull it, like I would, if I were in your place, I would pull it and try to read the chapter through without it, to see if the chapter still fits without it. Because you are right, the background of this is so important. I think I would argue, because I really want it to be chapter 2 the more we talk about it,
Okay.
So this is what you want a reader to do, right? Take ownership of your work. I think you have enough with the implication of stepsister and this conversation earlier with the father removing her from the home, like explaining why. Well, sorry, I'm talking over myself. With the father introducing her to her stepsister, I think it raises a question in the reader's mind. Something happened. What happened? And I think you can hold that question to chapter 2. I might be wrong, but I think you can hold, especially with her hand reaching to her locket, these pieces of her grandfather and her mother she has. I think you've created enough tension in this moment with her father that you can take this and actually you set up a question and a conflict here that you can then answer in chapter 2 to pull the reader into the next section. While we're here, I hadn't intended to talk about this right now, but while we're here, just to let you know, as you look through the edits I sent, you had a lot of these moments of the father introducing the stepsister kind of dispersed throughout. I put them all in the same place. So I pulled them out of a later script and put them all here, so that we can get a full scene. I really, and again, I think it's that I grew up watching TV and movies like we all did. I really think about books now cinematically. And I want established scenes. Like as a reader, I want to see a movie scene while I'm reading and then move on to another movie scene while I'm reading. So just trying to group this moment, this really powerful moment. And the first time that Heather kind of insults her for being a hero, insults her family for being a family of heroes, taking that and putting it in this all together so we can really just picture that video playing in our mind. Yeah. Okay, let's jump down to the last moment, because I promised I wouldn't go over an hour, even though I could talk about your script for days and days. I promised I wouldn't go over an hour. So let's pull down. Okay, so this is the last scene, and it's this great ending scene. For anyone watching this who hasn't read the full manuscript. Hopefully you're watching this when it's out in Amazon, and you can just go buy a copy right now and see what the final version looked like. See if I won, and that actually became chapter 2. So this is toward the end of the first chapter, where the stepmother, what happens is XJ finds these things she had as memorabilia from her past, crumpled and destroyed. And she determines that Heather actually comes in and tells her, like, hey, I destroyed these things so you can let go of your past and be more in the present. Again, it's this like horrible thing I've done to you that I consider to be a gift. And XJ comes running from her room in anger and encounters her stepmother in the hallway. Do I want to read the original this time? Let's just jump into the changed, into the edited. And we can talk about a few things I did in here for the mother's voice, because I was I love the contrast you've built. All in the first chapter, you have 4 very distinct voices. You have XJ's voice that we're kind of living in and becoming a part of. By the end of the chapter, I very much felt like I was in life with XJ. Excuse my son walking in the background. Life in the time of COVID. I tell you what, 5 kids in a townhouse, we're all over each other. No worries, better. So we've got this scene here with we've got the XJ's voice, we've got Heather's voice, which is this menacing, narcissistic. She does a lot of whispering. She does a lot of intimate, close talk, which is just beautiful for a narcissist, that she's got a lot of this, like, I'm not going to yell at you across a room. I'm going to get right in your face and like talk at you where you are. Almost that, like, she's using, in the first chapter, she's very much using this whisper as a weapon, which is so great for her character. Just wanting to pull in intimately to let you know, to express the power struggle that's happening. And then the third character whose voice is so strong in this chapter is the stepmother, Nadia. And you've set her up as a therapist in this world. And so part of what I did was, whenever she talks, originally you had in the scene her using conjunctions. And there was almost a southern sound to her voice. For example, right here she says, "What's happened?" And while there's nothing specifically wrong with what's happened, to give her more that therapist, what you describe as measured tone, I pulled out all of her conjunctions. So instead of "what's happened," I put XJ, "what happened?" Right? Just to give her, even though it's just that little change, just to start shaping her voice in this measured, professional way that really sets her apart from Heather and XJ. And I liked that her first words here are "slow down." Very, very much a therapist's statement of like, hey, slow down. So I'm going to push down to here. Part of what I really liked you doing is, and I think it's important as writers that we think about this, is how does our profession shape how we speak? So therapists, especially modern therapists, use a lot of we language because a lot of them are trained in motivational interviewing, and motivational interviewing teaches collaborative talk. So like, everything is about what we are doing together and the goals we are establishing, and we are going to talk through these things and we are going to discuss, rather than like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. So whenever she talks, I tried to really emphasize when you hadn't that we language. So this is a great example of it that you already had in the script. XJ narrates, I stated her like she was speaking a different language and I needed a universal translator. The people on the cube were my family. My stepmother continued, "Darling, in doomed Atlanta, we can't be seen as remembering or worshiping dead heroes or villains. It's not our way. We must remain neutral. Our survival depends upon it." So she's lecturing here, which is such a therapist thing, right? Like she's teaching, quote unquote, but it's all we, we do this, we do this, we do this, which is such a great moment to her voice. Yeah, so awesome. The other thing I did in here, again, coming back to what we said earlier, is you had moments that you were inserting narrative in the dialogue. So you were adding details about her office specifically, was the piece that's standing out to me. Let me see if I can find it quickly. I don't know what okay. I don't know that I can. Yes, here we go. So in here, you have this scene where you talk about this woman was opposite my mom in every way. I didn't hate her. It wasn't her fault. Saying that Nadia was different than my mom was an understatement. My mom had natural command and talked with authority. She had bold red tech lines with long Mohammedi dreadlocks. Was brown skinned and was curvy body. Nadia was scientific and measured. So I took this description of the two of them, which you had in the middle of the dialogue, and I made it the first thing we find out. Right at the beginning, let's get the image of Nadia up front so that we can see her in our mind and how she contrasts with the mother. And then midway through, you had and I'm not going to find it, but midway through their conversation, Nadia steps back and says, would you like to come and sit on my couch? Right? And you see the office, and XJ has this moment where she ponders why Nadia's office is so messy, and even though she's so meticulous. I took that and added it into Nadia's description so that, again, we can just get the push and pull of dialogue without pausing for narration, right? So that we can just get in that movie scene and play out that movie scene all the way through. Yeah, so I think those are my main thoughts. Thank you again so much for letting me read it. Was there anything else you wanted to particularly talk about, or?
No, I think you did an excellent job. I actually so you took my work in progress that I churned out. So you did something that I didn't, because usually I will write the whole novel and then I'll go back and start kind of, zeroing in on it. Yeah. So I wondered how messy it was going to be for you.
No, it's not. I mean, your first draft I wish my first drafts were this clean. It's really nice.
That makes me feel good.
Yeah, it's really nice. And the story's really strong and powerful. And again, the themes relating to, man, I hate this phrase, but non-traditional readers, that's the stupidest thing in the world, because that makes it sound like there is a traditional reader. So let's rephrase that. Relating to readers that are typically left out of contemporary literature. There we go. That's a better way to put it.
The things that I am interested in sometimes are very different than what other readers are interested in.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true. So I would rephrase that as respectfully and say the things that you are interested in, the publishing world tends to ignore.
Yes.
Because
that's a very good way.
I don't think that it's true that there aren't readers that are interested in that. Like, I have a feeling that there are, thousands of young teenage girls who have been bounced between houses, who don't recognize themselves in the world that they're in right now, who have been told that their past is garbage, that need to hear, like, no, your past is not garbage, and it can make you into the hero you're destined to become. Like, I think there's tons of readers out there that need to hear that. So there's a really beautiful message here.
So that gives me chills. That makes me feel like I'm on the right direction. But I think that exactly what you just said is why I was working on this story so intently.
Yeah.
I also know, because I've done a lot of research on the superhero genre, when I put my description of what the book was like in the superhero fiction authors group to ask their opinions, a couple of people were just kind of like, well, is this story really about her just having to, having to defeat her stepsister? I mean, and in a sense, she does have to do that in order to become a hero, but it's more than that. But I think the intimacy of the relationships and the intimacy of, like you said, here's this kid having to make this really serious choice about her life in a world that doesn't appreciate or care anything about her. Those
Yeah.
are very personal issues, and I think that's important to share. Mm-hmm.
And thinking about the superhero genre, something you might want to consider for a prologue, since the prologue that we talked about is actually going to be chapter 2. Something
You keep pushing that, huh? Okay.
something
It's on my list to look at.
nice. I made the list. I'll take it. Something you might want to consider for a prologue, just thinking about the superhero genre, is a lot of times what makes superhero origin stories work is that we already know the hero they're going to become. So, like, let's go to the Marvel movies because that's so relatable to people, readers of all things. The reason the movie Captain America works is because you know he's going to become Captain America.
Yes.
Right? Otherwise, this is a weird and slow start to a strange World War II movie. Right? Like, if you knew nothing about Captain America and you didn't know that he was going to end this giant buff guy with a shield, there's no way as a consumer we would tolerate the first 40 minutes of that movie where he's this weird, clunky, thin guy who's kind of succeeding at boot camp by cheating in the exercises, right? Like so you may want to think as a prologue, flashing forward and giving us an image of XJ in her fulfillment. Especially if you have a moment at the end of the book, at the end of the story, where XJ is a realized hero.
I should think on that.
Yeah, think on that. It's hard because, like, there's so many great books that don't do that. Like the Harry Potter series starts with Harry in a house. And while that is a superhero story, it's not, though. That's, I think, how it gets away with it. The Percy Jackson series pulls it off really well, where in the first chapter, he goes to battle with a I don't know, they call it the kindly ones in the book, with a kindly one in the museum in the opening scene of the book.
I feel like I remember that.
Yeah, he's got no idea who he is. He has never used powers before. He's on a school field trip. And we get this, and if you think about it as a plot, it actually doesn't make any sense. Right? Suddenly, he's sword wielding and fighting a monster with lightning. And then we get this immediate transition back to where he's normal high school kid. And it's really weird and it doesn't make any sense, but what it gives us is a flash as to who they are, like who he's going to be. Where we're like, oh, this kid has superpowers and he's special, and even though he doesn't understand it and know it, there's something here. So I would recommend, like, if you're thinking larger story and superhero genre, putting something in that shows the power of XJ, the potential of XJ, and then moving into this intimate protagonist-antagonist fight.
Lots of good ideas. Well, right now I just finished chapter 11.
Dang.
So I'm right in the middle of the book. And so it's like, oh.
The messy middle's the worst.
I know, right? Yeah. So I have a challenge set afoot. But
yeah, that's right about where I usually stop as manuscript. I'm like, I'm out. I need like 2 weeks. I'll come back. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving me all this time and for doing this with me. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.